Mattie Jo, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
That is how you prefer to be addressed, right? Mattie Jo, because it does say that on your screen. This is
Yeah,
a
Mattie Jo. Yeah, I'm very particular about it. It's so stupid, but it's like growing up, I had a bunch of nicknames within my family: Matilda, Mattie Jo, Mats. But at school, I was always just Mattie. But then I got to college, and I was one of 8 Maddies, and they were all Madeline and Madison's going by Mattie. And I'm like, well, that just is my name. It's not short for anything. So then I started insisting people call me Mattie Jo. So that's how we got here.
So as a Midwesterner, do you find, as a Midwesterner that's fallen in love with the East Coast in New York City, do you find that more Midwesterners use middle names, have 2 names than I just don't meet many people on the East Coast that say like my name is Scott Kent Jones. I'm never Scott Kent. I don't know.
Right. No, it's definitely a Southern or Midwestern thing. In my sorority, I lived with a Mary Jo, and then right next door was an Emma Jo. It's just, I don't know what it is, but culturally why that's a thing. But yeah, I don't meet many of those. In fact, it's constantly whenever I was bartending or whatever, and I'd introduce myself, they'd be like, oh, where are you from? You're not from around here. Immediately start mocking me in that way. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm from Missouri. And without fail, every time everyone would go, oh, Missouri. And I'd be like, that's not what I said, but sure. So it just comes with the territory, and I don't mind it. I embrace it.
So your book, God, Sex, and Rich People, is a recovering evangelical testimonies. You put yourself in a group that is recovering from a few things, okay? And you say this in
just
the
a few.
So you kind of give a barometer for folks reading the book. You say okay, if this is looming around in your head, it's sort of you might be part of this tradition, right? If you've got an obsession with sexual purity, right? Adherence to strict gender roles, a mostly literal translation of the New Testament, and whichever parts of the Old Testament support your particular view of God. I mean, I think you probably mean their literal interpretation, right? I mean, you're thinking interpretation of the text. And then you're also, the fourth hallmark is you've got converting non-Christians to Christianity, because Jesus, as the savior of the world, is absolute, infallible truth. And you say, what's interesting, you say even if you're part of a Catholic or Orthodox or some obscure Protestant sect or something, that if you gravitate to these 4 touchstones, that you're going to say that you're probably in this camp or in recovery from this camp, right? You're using evangelical in kind of a broad term, right? Do you meet Catholic and Orthodox folks who jive with this sort of stuff you're talking about here?
Oh, yeah. My book sold pretty well in Romania, and Romania is very Orthodox. So I think there's a lot of...
How many copies did it sell? That's fascinating. Is it translated into Romanian?
No, it's... Honestly, I had a few readers from Romania, because as you know, you read the book, my ex-boyfriend was from Romania, or is from Romania. So I think I just had this little...
This was the doorman,
following.
Right?
No. He's from Montenegro. Romanian was Zorro.
Zorro was a love of your life at the time. Zorro was a meaningful relationship.
Yeah, and he was Orthodox, and I would say he's still I would say he falls into that camp in terms of the sort of these behavioral obediences, and then I would say it's just more conservative, but I don't mean that as in Republican, but yes, there is some crossover, but yeah, just more conservative approach to the pursuit of the faith. And yeah, I definitely know plenty of Catholics who strongly identify with the messages from the book as well. Yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled that your book is selling in Romania. This is wonderful. When your world book tour takes you to Romania, I'm sure this will be fantastic. Maybe you'll meet some of Zorro's family and other folks like that. By the way, Zorro the Gay Blade is one of my favorite movies, circa 1983. George Hamilton. If you haven't seen it, I would
recommend.
Highly recommend. Now, also you say that these, it's pretty interesting, because I think a lot of my listeners wouldn't know this culture, right? So I want to spend a little
Mhm.
bit of time unpacking this and see if we're getting this right here.
Mhm.
So you grew up in a Christian home. Your parents, though, did fornicate.
Oh, yeah. Sure did.
They were evangelical Christians, but
Yeah.
before really going all out for the God Squad, they were. I mean, they were
Well, they were all out for the God
and
Squad
still
while
fornicating.
fornicating. I mean, they were in, I say like being an evangelical is literally in my DNA because I've been part of the Baptist tradition since both sides of the family great grandfathers. And then my parents met at a General Baptist summer camp, and then they went to a General Baptist university. They were at General Baptist University when they got pregnant. They were engaged, so they were already on their way to matrimony. But yeah, they were, I mean, my dad had recently changed his major from business to biblical studies. He had decided to go into the ministry. My mom like briefly called off the engagement because she didn't want to be a preacher's wife, even though she was a Christian. And
Yeah, and
then
there's
in
no
the
money. At least there's
interim,
some
they got
money in
pregnant.
there's some money in business administration, right? Where's the money in the Bible?
Exactly.
Unless you're like a
I
mega
mean, unless you go to
church.
a mega church, which we could get into, but yeah, that was not my dad's calling. Yeah. So, and my mom had grown up a preacher's kid, and she just didn't want that for her life or for her kids. But my dad, as read through the book, is kind of an exception to the preacher stereotype. So they ended up staying together, and yeah. So all that to be said, they were very much in the God Squad, though fornicating, because I
They
think
were,
most people are. They're
yeah,
lying.
yeah. It's very interesting. I always when you see like women on dating apps that identify very strongly as Christians. I mean, I always am thinking like you want to ask them like, well, what's your stance on fornication? Like,
Yeah.
where because you're
Just come right out with it.
like you're in your 30s. I mean, you're in your 40s, whatever. I mean, what are what's your relationship to this practice? Which I'm assuming
Hmm.
many adult Christians who are not married engage in pretty regularly. If I mean, I think that's probably safe to assume, although many don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So these are the sort of boundary markers you describe, okay?
Hmm.
And this was like reinforced by your church, your peer group, these norms.
Hmm.
You were a proud purity ring wearer,
Hmm.
committed to no sex before marriage. No shopping for the purity ring. I mean, was this meaningful? I mean, where do you buy these? What do you? I mean, I mean, do you go to a jewelry store? Do you go to buy them at a Christian conference? Where do you get the purity ring?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is like the idea behind this is someday you'll trade this for your wedding ring and your
Yeah.
virginity,
Right.
right? Like it's an
Totally.
exchange, like a
It's an
dowry.
exchange. Yes, exactly. So it obviously depends on your family and your practice. There was lots of purity accoutrement. I always say it's like it's so funny that like conservative Christians are always like finger wagging at the woke and calling people like virtue signaling. I'm like, have you driven through a Christian rural town? All it is virtue signaling. Everybody's virtue signaling their Christianity in some capacity, including purity rings, purity clothes, purity necklaces. Like there were so many
What
things.
about
And
the
so
Bibles? Don't people like in certain kind of these in these subcultures? Don't you want like a big study Bible with a lot of markers and stuff to show
yeah,
that
lots of
you're
highlighters.
really studying, you're really
Yeah,
marking, you're devoted.
absolutely, absolutely. And so in my family, we got to pick out our purity rings. I think mine was from like JC Penney, and it was like this tiny little diamond inside of a heart. I think my sisters, and actually I always joke like I lost a few of my purity rings. So the first one was from overstock.com. I do remember that. And then the second one was from like JC Penney, but they were like they did have like tiny diamonds because again it was like an exchange, right? But some just had like a true love weights on their ring. Those were kind of the most popular ones, and again there were necklaces as well, but I had like an actual piece of like a ring that my father gave me.
I saw recently a ceremony in Louisiana where current speaker Mike Johnson actually was with his daughter and a bunch of dads and daughters at this dance. And it's like a
Yeah.
dad-daughter dance.
Yeah.
And then they have this romantic dance, and then the daughter signs the book that she'll never have sex again.
Yeah,
And I
it's
thought
so weird.
it's very Handmaid's Tale-ish, very Handmaid's Tale-ish.
Like the fact that like anyway, I could go on and on, but the fact that like Christian nationalists are so like disgusted at like extreme Muslim terrorist, da, da, da. And I'm like, it's a fine line. Like Muslims are just evangelical Christians with like longer sleeves. Like it's all the same. It's just it might look different on the outside, but the core of it all is exactly the same.
Now, you also have, I mean, maybe some Muslims and evangelicals would want to dispute that because
Yeah.
there's some differences, but
Oh, totally.
we're
Totally.
painting with a broad brush. So, date to marry. Okay, this is
Mhm.
an important part of the culture, that no dating unless the men are serious potential husband prospects. Now, what's the difference between a
Mhm.
serious and a not serious husband potential
Yeah,
prospect?
yeah, so it's he's not serious husband potential if he can't lead you spiritually, if he doesn't have a relationship with Christ, if he's not taking his faith seriously, if he's not pursuing you as if you will be his future wife, if it's just like casual, then that's not serious. It has to be like I would not even go on a date with you if I can't see us potentially getting married.
I think most no when you're looking at these guys, right? Most of
Mhm.
these guys are teenagers, 20s or whatever you're dating. I don't think any of these guys know anything about the Bible. Like, how are they going to lead anybody spiritual? They're
Of
teenage
course, they
guys.
can't even, like, not it's ridiculous, but that's the idea,
All right,
right?
so
And,
this is
like
the idea. So you
yeah.
want him to be some kind of intrepid spiritual giant.
And he's, like, really involved with the church and is part of a small group and really active in worship and volunteer like, it's, like, all of that. They're, like, the man of God.
All right, he's a young
Yeah.
man of God. Now, strict boundaries. Okay, you
Mhm.
made pacts with your friends that you wouldn't go past kissing with any boys, wouldn't kiss anyone unless he's your boyfriend,
Mhm.
and would never date someone who wasn't leading us spiritually. I mean, what the heck? What does that mean when you're in high school for someone to lead you spiritually? What does that mean? Like, oh my God, should we watch Gilmore Girls or not? Lord, is this going to be too much? What does that mean?
What it meant in my world, at least, was again sort of like how active is he at your church? That was really like the biggest thing is like, is he active at church? Or like, I don't know if you've heard anything about Kanakuk camps. Those are in Branson and they're pretty infamous. Give them a Google. They're up against a lot of issues because they've had a lot of like predatory and like abuse behavior at the camps, but they're very, very well known in the Midwest and South, Christian sports camps. Anyway, that was a whole culture too. We called it the Canna culture. So it was like, was he involved at Kanakuk? So it was more of this like signaling because obviously none of it's like, I don't want to say none of it's real. Like, there's not a true spiritual component to it for teenagers. There was for me, but that didn't matter so much as like how he looked on the outside. And I mean, for a lot of like, me included, I didn't really date in high school because I was like, I'm probably not going to marry any of these guys. So why would I even
Why
date
even waste
them?
your time?
I did have one boyfriend and he was a spiritual leader. He was a good kid. He was very involved in his church. We read all the Christian literature together. We made all the boundaries.
What did you read together? What kind of books?
Like Donald Miller, Blue Like Jazz.
Wait,
I don't know, Rob Bell.
wasn't Rob Bell? These are not super Christiany books though.
I mean, not anymore. Rob Bell and Donald Miller have had iterations of
Right.
evolution, but at the
At
time,
the time,
no, they were
these were
big
on
voices
the
in the
okay. These
Christian
were
faith.
not on the naughty list yet.
No, no. Tim Keller, like big what is it? A Purpose Driven Life, whoever wrote that.
Rick
These
Warren.
Yeah, yes, 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 yes. These kinds of things. We even
So you were kind of softcore. I was imagining this was going to be Chuck Colson or the Charles Stanley, or this is a little softer core.
it's all relative. I would say it's sure. We weren't like sitting in the car listening to Rush Limbaugh together. No. But like we were still it was exclusively Christian literature. I mean, I remember I gave him hickeys like before Easter service and he was like in the Easter pageant whatever as like one of the guards and had these hickeys and we had to like have a whole conversation with our parents and tell them about like, oh, we're so sorry we failed, like,
What
and it
did
was
they
just a
say to
make
you?
out. It was
What did
just a
they?
make out.
So what did they say to you when you say to your parents, "I'm sorry that we shamed and defiled the Easter pageant by making him the Roman soldier"? Say, I mean, so God was so displeased that the executioner of Jesus had a hickey.
Yeah, yeah. It was, we didn't
So
say
what
it
did
to
they
my
say to you?
parents, we did it to his parents, but yeah.
So what did they say? Did they say, "You harlot? How
Yeah,
could you
it's
do this?"
I mean, not that explicitly, but his dad did say that he was, really disappointed in us and expected better.
Now look at this one. You say no masturbating because even thoughts about having sex with someone outside of marriage was sinful.
Mhm.
No masturbating. That okay, so that I can imagine for females, but do you have to date a guy that doesn't masturbate? Because where do you find that among teenage guys?
Well, I don't know if you've heard, but there's an epidemic amongst evangelical men and young men. They're all addicted to porn.
Right.
Like, because they're all so ashamed of any sexual urge, and they're told, like, basically, in what we joke, like, in teenage girl small groups or Bible studies, we would, like, talk about the scripture or whatever, and then we'd all, like, talk about the boys that we like and da 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 da. And then, like, in boys small groups, they would, like, talk about the scripture or whatever, and then they'd all go around and, like, admit how many times they'd masturbated that week. Like, there was so much shame with the boys around their sexual urges. Like, the women, your the worst part, or your biggest enemy is your body. Men, your biggest enemy is your brain. And so these boys grow into men who are so afraid of their sexuality that it ends up expressing itself in these, like, really strange and egregious and extreme ways. Like, you're married, you're happily married, you saved yourself until marriage, but you're, like, secretly watching porn like 6 hours a day, including in your office, and you're a pastor at a church, or you're like these kinds of things. So they're all still masturbating. They're not lying about it. They're just feeling really, really bad about it.
This is interesting though, what you're saying here, when you're pulling the curtain back on these small groups, right? So
Mhm.
so here you have you're got these groups of teenagers, and I'm assuming they're led by some kind of youth leader or something, some kind of
Mhm.
and the women are talking about the boys they want to date, right? So the women, that obsession is already about the partner, right? There's already
Mhm.
a sense in which the female identity is with who they're partnered with. So
Mhm.
the fantasy is about partner projection,
Mhm.
or the male fantasy is a lot more guttural, right? That's just about like about porn.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting dynamic about what the teenage sort of drive is, because one is towards sort of romance
Mhm.
and the other is toward porn.
Well, it's also conditioning, right? Because there was no space for women. If you were like me, like, I always joke that this is for all the like, I'm for all the girls who were called boy crazy and grew up into being like sex positive hoes is like my, tongue in cheek of it all. But it, because there was no space as a woman to have sexual urges. So if you were a woman who was masturbating, you just couldn't even talk about it because you were convinced you had to be the only one. No, women aren't masturbating because women are not sexual. Women don't want sex. We want to be wanted for sex, but not so much that we, like, cause men to stumble. And so it was really, for me, and I know there were other girls, because as I've gotten older and obviously writing about this stuff, people do tell me things, but they, like, women were absolutely masturbating, and we absolutely had sexual urges, but there was no place for that in the church. You were not supposed to be sexually desiring as a woman.
Now, here's another thing that you say, that this is part of the purity culture. Exclusively consume Christian media. No TV,
Mhm.
music, or books that elevated a sexual or secular lifestyle, because you wanted to fill your thoughts with things of the Lord
Mhm.
that are worthy of praise. Dear Jesus God. Dear Jesus God. It sounds like a love letter. Dear Jesus God.
That's the
So
prayer.
no Friends, no Sex in the City, right? No, I mean,
Definitely not. I didn't watch Friends or Sex in the City until my 30s.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What was that like when you first watched it? Was it
Well, I mean, I had lived in New York for 10 years at that point, so it was like, I mean, I did watch some, don't get me wrong, I still listened to secular music and watched secular TV, but these were kind of like what you were supposed to be striving for. So, like, my sister only listened to Christian music, like, exclusively. And in our house, for a time, my dad, like, banned all secular music for good reason, because we were all getting into, like, hip hop and rap, and that's probably not the greatest music to be listened to when you're going through puberty. And so
What is the greatest music to be listening to when you're
I
going through
think, like,
puberty?
I don't know, That's a good question, but not things that are like explicitly sexual and sexualizing. Like my dad didn't like us to listen to Eminem because his music was so abusive and gross towards women. And most rap music is. Most rap music is pretty horrible in terms of how it speaks about women. So I understood why. And he also like blocked MTV for a time in our house and things like that. But like I watched Disney Channel, like I was really into the High School Musical series, you know, harmless things like that. But the goal was, I mean, there were definitely pastors who were like, you should not be letting anything that is like of the devil in your brain or your eyes or at all, like your ears, your eyes, your heart, right? Because that the more you let in, the more you're going to want to sin. So yeah, I didn't watch Friends, I didn't watch like How I Met Your Mother, I didn't watch Sex in the City. I actually still have never even watched Gilmore Girls. There were a lot of like cult classics of my generation that I just missed because I wasn't consuming that kind of
Thank God for
media.
Netflix. You can get
Yeah,
it all.
exactly. I have now seen Friends and How I Met Your Mother and Sex in the City.
Now, you also said the last one is modest is hottest.
Oh, yeah.
You say, I would not dress in a way that could cause a fellow Christian man to stumble. If you're in high school, I don't know. I'm guessing a burqa could cause most boys to
Yeah,
stumble.
totally.
But
Yes.
that meant no spaghetti straps, no shorts that weren't at least 3 sizes too big, and definitely no two-piece bathing suits
Definitely not.
around men of God. This is so.
Right.
This is pretty
The
repressive,
portal
right?
to hell is a female belly button for sure.
Really.
Yeah.
All right. See, I'm learning a lot here. This is very helpful. So you grew up in this Midwestern Christian world, and then your life is transformed because you go to New York City. I think about
Mhm.
New York. I think about uh, the movies. Like one of my favorite movies is Crimes and Misdemeanors, great Woody
Mhm.
Allen film.
Mhm.
And New York is like another character in that film, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the city is just like a character in the film. I mean, what was it like as a Midwestern girl to step foot in New York for the first time?
For the first time,
Yeah.
I was I was so excited. Yeah, I was just so excited to experience it. It's interesting because like, oh god, it's hard to remember a time in my life where New York wasn't a character in my story, to use your term there. I went to New York for the first time when I was 19 and I'm like, yeah, wow, I just can't remember a time where she wasn't part of my vision, but she wasn't. Like before I went, I didn't know how much I would love New York City, but when I visited for the first time, it was just the antithesis to everything I had grown up with, and I think that the novelty of that was really exciting, but also it made me realize pretty quickly like, oh, this is why I don't fit in Missouri. I'm not meant to be there. I'm meant to be here. I really loved the anonymity that the city offered. Like, no one, I say, like, no one gave a fuck what I was doing, who the fuck I was fucking, or if I was saying the word fuck. And I loved that. And because, the who are you and no one's watching, you will find out in New York because truly no one cares. Whereas, like, if I was in Missouri, is any decision really my own? Because everyone's judging me. Everyone knows. Everyone's going to find out. And I didn't have that in New York. And that was really exciting. Of course, I didn't know that right away. Like when I first visited, all I knew when I first visited was that it was totally different than the homogeny of Missouri, and there were so many different kinds of people, and that I liked that it made me feel so small, but yet full of potential. Like I was so insignificant and yet I could rise to my fullest potential there. Because as long as I was in Missouri, I was going to be squelched because I was always going to be told to course correct. Whereas like I knew I wouldn't have that in New York.
It's interesting when you say that you move from the place that's sort of like censorious and
Mhm.
closed-minded and a place that doesn't encourage free expression and liberty and
Mhm.
self-actualization to a place that encourages all these things. But, a lot of political analysts say that progressive culture is exactly that, is why
Mm,
we got Donald Trump. That progressive culture where if you don't use the right pronouns or if your sensitivities are just off, that you're shamed. And so a lot of people
mhm,
say the reason why people voted for Donald Trump was exactly the kind of progressive culture that exists on the coast. I mean, it's a culture I'm the product of.
mhm,
Uh, it is censorious,
mhm, mhm.
is a shaming
Like, we
culture.
are the ultimate cancel culture. It's but
So,
it's
so,
become that. It wasn't
yeah.
always that, I don't think.
Maybe there's a
Yeah.
transition, right? That you wind up. You talk about in your book going the
Yeah.
pendulum swings. Maybe it's a pendulum swing that.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, I made a reel about this the other day that perhaps the only value that Americans now share is the value of freedom. Progressives value it, which is why they want to be able to express themselves in whatever way and they don't want their rights taken away. And conservatives value it, and that's why they don't want the government in their pockets. It's just everybody wants to express that value in a different way. And I think you have to be respectful of, so long as it doesn't harm, which is the tricky nuance of it. But at the time when I didn't get super politically involved or even aware until around 2016 when Donald Trump rose to the forefront for a
Your
myriad of
parents are
reasons.
evangelicals, right?
Yeah.
Sort of. I mean, they taught you the Bible's inspired and the
Yeah.
miracles really happened and that God has a personal plan for your life and
Right. Hmm.
accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior, all that stuff.
Yeah.
How do they feel about Trump? Did they vote for Donald Trump?
Yeah, so that's a thing that's like different from my experience than a lot of people from my background is my parents are not Trump supporters. And in fact, that whole situation was a big part of why my dad is no longer in the ministry.
Wow,
And
wow.
yeah, he's since left the ministry. My parents don't really go to church regularly. When they do go to church, they go to this like small little Methodist church in town. They really, sorry, you can hear that city
It does.
sounds, but
I love it.
they my dad really is a man whose faith is grounded on the beliefs of Jesus's compassion and cheering for the underdog and calling out dogmatic religious leaders who are like totally missing the plot, right? So then when he, oh, this is the system I'm part of, and that system pushed him out repeatedly. Repeatedly, my dad got pushed out of churches for not being that. He finally, after the whole like 2016 and everything, he was just like, I can't do this. It still is like so maddening to him. When I was visiting for my book tour, I was going through the Midwest and I was like, Dad, are you okay? And he was like, woke up last night from a dream that I spat in Donald Trump's face. I'm just so angry.
Wow.
So my parents are very different in that regard because they see that he is like the antithesis of Christian values in their eyes. And then also, like, my family, like you said earlier, my parents were pregnant before marriage. They've been on the receiving end of a lot of spiritual side eye in their day. So they don't really they have a pretty low tolerance for it. And they didn't raise us to be that way, which is, I would say my parents are to blame for my deconstruction because they gave me true Christian values. And so I was able to see how what I had learned in purity culture and, legalistic, dogmatic evangelicalism is not that. Yeah. So they're not Trump supporters. No.
You go to college and
Hmm.
you fall in love with this guy named Brandon.
Hmm.
I mean, you used his name in the book too.
Yeah.
So
They're all changed
they're
names.
all changed
Nobody's their
names.
actual
Okay.
names. Yeah.
Everybody needs a Brandon in their life.
Yeah. Oh,
So
Brandon.
so he's Catholic and you're like, I'm Catholic, but I guess I can deal with it. He's handsome. He's got washboard abs and the whole
Yeah.
thing. And it's interesting you guys are going to attempt purity culture and you're one step forward, two steps back with it.
Yeah.
And then it's really interesting that you describe this really torrid evening
Hmm.
and you perform oral sex on it, right? And you feel connected.
Hmm.
He feels overcome with guilt and
Yeah,
shame.
and shame. Yeah.
Do you think this is common in purity culture that after the climactic moment, like that the woman feels closer and the
Mm,
guy feels like, "Oh my," it's the Madonna whore complex, right? You went from
yeah,
Madonna to the whore. Like, you just you and I feel guilty about myself. I
yeah.
feel like now you're the temptress, now you're the Jezebel, now you're the I mean, do you feel like this is a common experience that's tough to sort through as a woman in this culture? Because
Oh,
at one minute you're the object of adoration and connection, and then, oh my God, you're the slut temptress that's gonna pull me away from Jesus.
well, that's why they're all addicted to porn. And I talk about that in that chapter is because he actually, it's funny to hear like the no pun intended insertion of that detail because I didn't actually perform oral sex on him that night and he didn't come.
Oh, right, right. This was the
Yeah,
night where, yeah,
I
this
was
was
just naked
right.
and we
You were
were naked
naked, right,
and
right.
we were gonna have sex and then he kicked me out and made me go to his roommate's room and then he watched porn
Right.
after I left. And this is why, because all of
Which for him was preserving the
yeah,
there was something about he was preserving your virtue in the moment, which made him feel
subconsciously,
even worse, right? I
yeah,
mean, this is
yeah, subconsciously, that's probably what he's doing. But like all these men know is that they cannot see their partners in a sexual way because they have Madonna hoard us and they've been taught to um, their entire lives, and it's the same for women. We Madonna whore ourselves, which I did for years. I had no idea how to integrate both like the personal parts of me and the sexual parts of me because I thought they were completely separate. So for years, I was either like fucking guys or I was dating guys, but never both at the same time. So yeah, the the chaff and weeding is what I call it, or the Madonna whore, or I say like saint or slut. Women are not granted the privilege of complexity. Like we are just a binary. And the men receive that message as well. And then this is how it manifests in the Christian culture. I mean, I just know so many too many stories of women who have been married to their husbands for forever and then find out they have some like secret kink that they've been like cheating for years doing this thing with like sex workers or whatever and it's like are you serious? And but yeah, but it totally makes sense, which is why it bothers me whenever sex scandals come out in churches and the pastors are like they just blame it all on sin. We just need to pray for their forgiveness and pray for their recovery and redemption and like they use all the and I'm like you are the problem. You created this problem. But they just blame it on sin. And it's this like self-fulfilling prophecy because it's like, oh, if you dabble in the sexual sin, bad things are going to happen. But they church cultivates a culture of perversion around sex, and then they just blame it on something else.
I want to something else I found in the book that I this is like tangential, but I thought was really interesting that you go to this missionary trip to
Yeah,
Indonesia with Jesus Speaking Light,
yeah,
JBL for short,
yeah,
and you sign a release that says that if you're kidnapped, they will not be responsible for your
yep,
ransom.
yeah.
That sounds shitty to me. That
You think?
I'm not saying I expect them to have all this capital on hand, but I mean that is what are you? How old are you when you signed this thing?
I was 20 to
I mean,
21, 21.
do you have some reticence about going on the trip when you signed that?
You're so well, we didn't know that. We didn't know that was in the contract. The only reason I knew that is because
You
no,
signed
I
it
didn't
without
know.
reading that. Okay.
Oh yeah, I mean, like whatever to do for Jesus, right? For the Great Commission. But other girls in my house did have their parents look it over, and their parents were like, no. So two girls from the house didn't end up going on the trip, and that's the only reason I know this. And whenever the parents brought it up to JBL, they were like, look, we're all at risk going to Target every day, but we just know that like the Lord's will is sovereign. That's the response that they would give to parents concerned for so if my kid gets abducted while abroad you just have no responsibility so yeah it was but I commonplace everybody was in these organizations if you weren't it was almost weird and if you weren't in these organizations someone from the organization was trying to get you to join the organization like it was just I don't know I did not think anything of it now looking back I'm like I hope they've revised that contract. But a lot of these, I don't know if it's generational or if it's just cultural, but a lot of these parents just didn't, they just kind of blindly trusted these ministries. Again, if you want to Google Kanakuk camps later, a long history of child abuse, essentially. I mean, Pete Newman is in prison for life for what he did to kids there. And people still send their kids to this camp, even knowing that there's this long history of problematic behavior from the leadership. It's wild to me.
You tell a story in the book where you're in New York, and I don't think you've moved to New York full time yet, or maybe you had, and they're basically you're sleeping on this guy's floor, who's engaged to somebody
Yeah,
else.
the engaged guy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
please.
engaged
I
guy.
slept on the bed.
Or he slept on the bed. You
He
slept on the
was
bed. He
meant to
slept on the
sleep on the
floor.
floor. He did
Right.
not.
Then you did make out a little bit, and this goes on before a few times before he gets
Mhm.
married. But you said this, which I thought was really interesting. You said, and then we had a sleepover. This was the beginning of my necessary pendulum.
Mhm.
All recovering evangelicals experience this to some extent. It's the time in your life when you inexplicably go from following the most extreme rules about purity and Christ-like morality to a T, to not even knowing if you believe in God and having a slew of one-night stands.
Mhm.
I wasn't quite to the questioning the existence of God having one-night stands phase, but I did go from making very strict rules about sleeping in my bed with my boyfriend of 2 years to go to sleeping in a total stranger's bed after knowing him for 2 hours. All within 3 days. Religious recovery is weird. That is it sort of like a Jenga game when you have a worldview like this, where I mean, I always think of, like, you think of a wedding cake, right? Or something that with a big foundation
Mhm.
and a small, slightly smaller piece and a smaller piece and a smaller piece, so that there's a stability to the thing, where this worldview seems like a Jenga game, right? So if you
Mhm.
pull out Noah's Ark didn't happen, or oh my God, I slept on a stranger's couch, or the whole thing can come tumbling down. Is that the idea?
Sure, which is why a lot of these systems vilify secular content. It's why the Christian right wants private Christian schools to be where most people are sending their kids, because the more insular you can make a community, the less access they have to other types of literature and media and lines of thinking. It's another reason why conservatives are trying to vilify colleges as liberal institutions, because the second you pull, like, it is a Jenga game, it falls apart very quickly. If you just experience a little bit of life, if you read a freaking history book, if you talk to anyone outside of your community, it falls apart really quickly. And then that's why I say, like, I just felt like I was sitting atop this atomic wasteland of my previous identity rubble for so long, and I had no idea how to rebuild it because it happened so fast, and it's like happening before you can even catch up with it. It's like you're unlearning and relearning all at the same time, and you can't, it's like cognitive malfunction, and so that's definitely what it was one thing, starting with the fact that, like, oh, if I don't get married by this age, what, I'm just supposed to be a virgin, and I'm supposed to be a virgin until I get married. So therefore, my entire life is centered actually around getting married, not around what I want. That's by design. That is social control of women. So that's what I mean by, like, just one thing. I just didn't get married by 22 like the rest of my friends. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wait, this whole system was social control the whole time. It falls apart
How
really
many of
quick.
your friends got married at 22?
A lot of them got married either during college or right out of college within
How
like
many of them
2
are
years.
divorced now?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't think.
I mean, statistically, the odds are about half, and for evangelical
Yeah,
Christians, it's not any better.
yeah. I My close friend group, I don't actually think any of them are, like, my close friend group are divorced. Um, but that I know plenty of people who have read my book who are part of, and their story is sort of like copy paste, got evangelical married, got evangelical divorced. Like, so I think it just depends on the couple. But yeah, a lot of my friends got married young.
So your first sex experience. This is great, and this is a great piece of writing.
Thank you.
I thought this was really helpful, actually, because it's probably echoes a lot of women's experiences. You felt like this was going to be this ultimate, the thing that was supposed to define you, and you say, this is not what happened. What happened was I barely felt a thing, and the entire endeavor was complete in around 3 minutes and 12 thrusts. As I lay there, after having participated in what I had been told would be the pinnacle of my existence as a woman, I expected to have all kinds of existential dread and immediately start praying for forgiveness. I've heard of women in similar situations getting hives and being rushed to the ER for some unexplained penetration PTSD response. But much to my own surprise, I was not thinking about God, getting into heaven, or enduring PTSD at all. Instead, I just lay there, thrusted into thinking, what if I had married this? Like, that's so honest, right? But what's interesting as I read that, I thought, it's interesting because if you're growing up with the sex is something special, filthy, dirty, magical that you should save for the one you love, right? I mean, you build up to this experience, and this was traumatic. It wasn't even that traumatic. It was weird. It was anticlimactic. It was not. It didn't feel great. You wind up, I think, getting a Plan B pill because you're worried about condoms, and you go to McDonald's and you're washing it down with like a Diet Coke and a cheeseburger. And this is I mean, this is the crescendo of all your angst about sex is with this guy, right? I mean, what a downer.
Yeah. It's funny. My editor made me change some of that section. It was a little too honest. She was like, you can give a nod, but you don't need to explicitly like body shame this guy. And I was like, okay. But the reality is that if I would have shared that with, I was still in the church, they would have said, oh, well, it's like that for a while. You just have to work at it. It's never going to be great right away. I mean, I've literally had people say that to me in podcast interviews when I'm being interviewed by like more conservative sources. They're like, well, it always like you have to get to know someone. It like takes a little bit. I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. I understand that you have to get used to someone and that intimacy grows as emotional intimacy grows and like all of that and comfortability with a person and all. I understand. I'm talking about anatomy compatibility. And that was never spoken of in church. It was basically like, you have an untouched holy hole, everything will be perfect. And then I was like, oh, so like all of our pastors just had like micro penises because they didn't want us to know any better. Like, I was just like, I had heard so many stories of girls like bleeding and being in so much pain and and I was like, did no one ever have an experience where they were like, is it in? And why aren't we talking about that reality that like some bodies just are not compatible? But that was never a thing. It was always just like, oh, as long as you're both like in love with the Lord and pursuing the Lord, like it'll all work out just fine.
I mean, what if you said like, I know we're both loving the Lord and pursuing the Lord, but is it in? And Lord, is this
The title of my next memoir, is it in?
Is it in? Lord, I prayed, Lord, is it really in?
I
Lord,
love
how could you have given me this?
Lord, it's me, Mattie Jo. Is it in?
Is it in? So I think this is one of the things I think is very interesting about purity culture and all sort of repressive cultures, right? Because it leads to, and it gets into like the Donald Trump thing, right? It leads to transgressiveness, right? Because once you put up these boundaries, right? Once you say no, this goes back to the Apostle Paul, right? Without the law, I didn't know that it's sin and all this stuff. So you say, like you say, don't walk on the grass. What do you want to do? I want to walk on the grass. So this is what's great. You say later on the book, you say, I did want to have sex, but the more sex I had, the more I realized I wanted to have sex in like the abstract. I wanted to be sexually active, sure. But then I would meet dudes, use the word dude a lot. I would meet dudes, start making out and think, oh, we should have sex now, probably, when I really wanted to stop at second base. But I'd still do it because I felt like I needed to make up for lost time. I needed practice. The only thing I feared more than being not married by 30 was still having bad sex by 30. And I love this line. If I'm going to be a fornicating Jezebel, I thought, I might as well be good at it. That's it, right? If you're going to do something, do it with excellence.
That's a Bible verse, right?
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure Paul says that.
Did you get better at it? I mean, where do you rate yourself as a fornicator right now? Right, when you wrote this to
You can
now,
call my boyfriend in. No.
yeah, we can. Yeah, I'd love to ask you, like, what kind of a fornicator are you?
And
I mean, yeah, are you an excellent fornicator at this point?
I would say I would say I'm pretty discerning. So we'll start there. Like back in those days, I was not discerning. Like I said, I was just kind of like,
Would it
you'll
be
do.
would it be the greatest, like, if you went on, like, a Christian dating site and your screen name was Fornicating Jezebel 6969? I bet you would be the most swiped on person on that
I
site.
should try this. This is a great
This is a great
social
you would get
experiment. I'll do
so
it.
many things.
Oh, and they would immediately start being so inappropriate because I've definitely experienced that where like again back to the like Madonna whore, like guys think because I talk about sex it means that I want to have sex with them, and I'm like these two things are not the same. Like just cuz I talk about sex, sir, does not mean that I am interested in sex with you. But it's like woman, sex, immediately sexualized. Like they just can't distinguish the two things in their brains at all.
I assume as a baseline operative assumption, it served me well that absolutely no woman wants to have sex with me. And it's usually accurate. I feel like it's a great baseline, and I'm usually
Start. It's
not.
kind of like start there and then let them, prove otherwise.
I'm almost never wrong about it. Almost never wrong.
Oh, don't say that.
So you meet this really interesting guy, FBM.
Yeah, fuck boy monster.
Yeah, and he says some things. I think he gave you actually great advice, right?
Yeah. So annoying when it comes considering the source, but it was good advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought, I mean, he's a transactional guy, and this is part of. I mean, I think this is part of the. I mean, I think the truth that I think conservatives get about the libertine sexual culture that many of us in blue state, coastal realities or whatever live. Well, I mean, people in the middle of the country live because the teenage pregnancy rates are higher there than in blue states. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the red states don't live very conservative, actually, when you look at the
Yeah.
data. But anyway, I mean, I think what the downside of it is sometimes these sexual cultures are transactional, right? And people, get wounded because we're messy, and as much as we attempt to sort of be compartmentalized, we don't always compartmentalize that well. But you're talking to him about some of these transactional and weird sexual relationships you have, and I love this. This is a great conversation as you relay. You say, so we were talking about how dating was going, and I said something about how I thought none of these dudes I was seeing were working out because I was sleeping with them before they were my boyfriend. Do you really think that, FBM asked? Think what? That none of these guys likes you because you're sleeping with them? Isn't that how it goes? I show I'm too easy, so they lose interest. Oh, dear God, he said, he exasperated as he threw down his conducting stick or something. That is absurd, MJ. Sex is not your currency. There's so much more to you than whether or not you have sex with a person. And if a dude or anyone doesn't see that, that's on them, not you. And you say, wow, you think I'm so much more than sex. That's a compliment, right? And then he continued, besides, don't these guys have sex with you too? Why aren't they slut shaming themselves? And no, it's interesting because I think he actually gives you a pretty instructive insight about the nature of these interactions, right?
Totally. And that, that night, again, I was so mad. And I do go on to say, like, of course, what's unfortunate about this is he was just saying this so that he could manipulate me emotionally into continuing to sleep with him. But it is true. Like, it is true that, and I've had this conversation with like family members and men who will say like, yeah, I don't know what it is. It is just kind of like you lose a little bit of interest once if they give it up, quote unquote, too soon. And I'm like, you were there too, my guy. Like, why do you not hold yourself to the same standard? Of course, they've never even considered it, And also, like, do you hate yourself that much that you're disgusted by a woman who would fuck you? Like, what's wrong with you? It's just such backwards thinking that we accept in this. And yeah, and then like there's so much more to me than quote unquote just sex. And that's not my problem. If they see me as like I can't be a whole human because I've slept with them, that is a problem with their worldview, not me. as a person and my value. And, and then later in another chapter in the book, I talk about how my brother sort of helped me clarify this a little bit more with like a guy, like if I don't want a guy to bail quickly after we've had sex, then it might actually behoove me to take a little bit longer to see if what his interest is. Is it in me or is it just in a casual thing? And only time will tell, because a guy who is truly interested in you won't bail after you sleep with him. And a guy who is not interested in you won't stick around just to sleep with you. So if you want to give it a little bit more breadth, then do that. But you sleeping with a guy in a certain time frame is just what's the word? Arbitrary.
Do you go to church now?
No.
You would still self-identify though as a Christian, wouldn't you?
So for a long time, I didn't.
Okay.
I would say only it was like really the beginning of this year that I started to really be like, okay, yeah, I do think like this is. I wrote a Substack piece called "My God" about my decision to identify as Christian once again, and really it just comes down to familiarity. Like, this is the way in which I feel. Oh, my light just shut off. That's okay. This is the way in which I feel I most connect with the divine. And so, but I'm not the kind of Christian that's like, this is the only way. I don't really believe in heaven and hell. So, like, I don't know. I don't believe that everybody needs to be a Christian. I just think like this is the way, and the story of Jesus is the way in which I feel the most connected to the divine. So that's what I'm gonna do for me.
What about that story? I'm curious, what about that story still connects you to divine reality?
I think that a lot of, now obviously it's very convoluted. Jesus is different figures in different gospels. Like we can get pretty didactic about scriptural criticism there, but I think a lot of Jesus's teachings get to the root of humanity, and like even love your enemy. That's so hard to do. That's like actually impossible. Maybe. I think about, like, I was talking to an Israeli friend the other day about the Israel Gaza situation, and like I like look at that alone and be like, love your enemies. Love your enemies would solve that problem. But in actuality, it's so hard. Or love your neighbor, the golden rule, right? Like these very like bare bones suggestions, and the way that he treats people. He calls out the hypocrisy of religious leaders who are exploiting religion for their benefit. He is for the marginalized, the impoverished, those who are not as welcome by society. He touches those who should be untouchable, who are filthy, in a time when those rules in Judaism had a lot to do with like actual like cleanliness and health, and he did it anyway. I think a lot of that just speaks to humanity and where we need to confront our own flaws, because everybody is capable of evil. And I think if you can adopt these things through a lens to yourself, it creates humility, and therefore you're not always finger wagging, because look, humans love tribalism. We love to other, and the less we can other, the less harm I think there is in the world.
Yeah, Miroslav Volf, great theologian, says something like
Love him. Yeah, he wrote a book with my friend Matt. Yeah.
he says something, forgiveness flounders because I exclude my enemy from the fellowship of humanity, exclude
Mm-hmm.
myself from the table of sinners, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to sort of impute the worst motives to the other and the best motives to ourselves. Well, what
Totally.
if we flip that, right? Which I guess
Right.
you're saying that story of Jesus kind of encourages you to do, right? That you, in that score, you kind of maybe try to see your enemy or your adversary's motives in the best possible light and cast the most suspicion on your own.
Yeah.
Where am I conflicted and self-justifying and
Oh,
conflicted and
yeah.
that sort of
I
thing?
mean, righteous anger is dangerous because it is righteous. You are justified in your anger. Let's just take Miss Andre. really quick, if we want to like dive into that really quickly. I am justified in everything that I have gone through in my life, including rape, including all of the harms of the church and purity culture, these things, these punitive ideology that has wrecked my psyche and I have had to excavate myself from in adulthood. I have righteous anger at men, and that can be so harmful. And it doesn't actually do anything to heal anything if I just stay angry at men. And like, even when Charlie Kirk was shot, that was a moment for me also of self-reflection, of like, oh, this is why love your enemies is so important, because I am not so bummed that Charlie Kirk got shot. And that means that I am capable of evil. Like, that's where it's a slippery, slippery slope. The second you can other, you can dehumanize.
Yeah.
And that to me is where that spirit versus the flesh it's not a litany of moral behavior. It's that.
Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, he's actually been a guest on the show. He's a great guy. He wrote an essay. It's really powerful, called "The Body's Grace," about human sexuality. I don't know if you know the essay, but it's wonderful.
I'd love to read it.
Yeah, it's great. I'll send you a link to it
Yeah,
after
please.
we're done. And he says the body's grace is not a way of dealing with or explaining or justifying the body. It is part of the reality of the body's nature as gift. The name sacrament has sometimes been used to speak of what's revealed in the intense, skin-rippling consciousness of the sheer there-ness of the body. I mean, ultimately, isn't that the sexual mystery, the sheer there-ness of the other body, that somehow you're present to that. And this when someone's there-ness is present to your there-ness, and there's the mystery in that. But it seems that so often, I mean, that elusive experience can elude us, right? I mean, and so often I think we miss. But I mean, but it seems like that's what in the sexual intimacy we're after, right? We're after this. I love it, this skin-rippling consciousness of the sheer there-ness of one another's bodies, right? It gets us out of our heads. It gets us out of
the presence.
And we're actually connected to something that can be really transcendent.
Yeah. Rob Bell says in his book, Sex God, that healthy intimacy and orgasm is a slice of heaven. And like we're meant to know that. That's like a spiritual transcendence. I call it celestial sex. And yeah, and I mean, that's again like golden rule sex. It can be as simple as just treat the other person with the humanity you would want them to treat you with. And don't just I mean, if there's consent to be objectified, fucking go for it. But like, you know what I mean? Like it can be fun, it can be respectful, it can be honoring of the other person's dignity, and you can be fully present with them. And that is beautiful. There's nothing sinful about that.
You're clearly right. I mean, this book, I think, is clearly written for people who have been in this kind of evangelical world and are finding their way out of it, finding their way through it, finding their way to a different kind of faith or out of faith and into some nebulous form of something else. I mean, how do you, I mean, where do you see your journey going? I mean, you're saying you're self-identifying as a Christian again. I mean, you're writing as a Christian that's kind of in recovery, that you're in this sort of other, that's a very powerful image, right? Because so many people have been enslaved to addiction, to substances in a way that have dehumanized them. And in some sense, part of this tradition has done that to you, right? I mean,
totally.
And you have to recover and learn how to live anew. I mean, where do you, I mean, what does spiritual healing look like for you? What does a more integrated Mattie Jo look like, where the sacred and the sexual and all these things are part of a whole?
I mean, I think I'm there now. I wanted to write so much more, but I was like, it's another book entirely. Like, this was really just the first 3 years of my deconstruction, and then have this whole other chapter of my life that happened, like, as I mentioned a little bit ago about like I was sexually assaulted and that led me into sexual trauma therapy. And there was this whole other like, yeah, just like 4 to 5 year journey of really getting into the nitty gritty of that and learning how to integrate. You know, I say in the book, this system teaches us self-severance. And so the antidote to that is integration, is honoring and knowing and integrating all parts of yourself and not saying this part is bad and this part is not, you know, whatever is good. And so I think, you know, where I am now, I am working on a TV show by the same title. The pilot you can watch on YouTube, God, Sex, and Rich People. It's the proof of concept pilot. But I'm working on a one-woman show. It's both of these things, all of these things are being developed in an artistic incubator at Yale. And I feel like through that process, I've also been introduced to, like I said, Matt Croasman. I met him through this incubator, other theologians through this incubator. And I don't know the timeline exactly, but I do want to apply to Yale Divinity, and I want to get an MAR, a Master's in Divinity and Art, and use my artistry and to sort of bring positive theology, good theology to the masses, because all that gets, so I have this vision of a production company that creates faith-based sort of content. For example, a book that's coming out in February is a fictional telling of the story of Eve. I would want to bring stories like that to film. God, Sex, and Rich People would be like the maiden voyage, that TV show. Stories that are like faith adjacent, and bring positive theology to secular audiences, because all they know are MAGA. All they know are the toxic and harmful and hateful. And I want to show that there is a way forward if you are a person who desires spirituality. There is a way forward in these story, and you're not alone within your story. Is
Well,
what I can do.
blessings in that work. God, Sex, and Rich People is you say it's a recovering evangelical testimony, and it's a great testimony. You tell a great story. I
Thank
really appreciate you writing the book, and I appreciate you taking some time to talk with me about it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure was all mine.